Okay. All right, so here we go. We are. I hope I sent out the PDF. Did I send out the PDF? I didn't.
Didn't
It
get
wasn't.
anything.
It wasn't part
No.
of the email. Oh no. Uh, okay. Let me see if I can be helpful by putting it on the screen at least. You didn't get an email from me this week about the class?
Nope.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
That's weird. I put it together. Hold on. Deep dive into davening. PDF.
You probably forgot to press send.
Yeah, I
Went
guess
into
so. Hold on
draft.
1 second. I'm gonna put a link in the chat, and that's gonna be the best way to see it, because if I put it on my screen, then I can't see any of you. So I'm gonna just put the link here. Would you mind opening it up, and maybe you can put your Zoom screen and your PDF screen side by side, if you want to see that. If there's a problem opening,
Oh, gee,
That's got to be a
that's
problem. That might be a problem.
oh, because it's so small.
no, it's legible, but can't put it all at the same time on.
All right. Let me share my screen then. We'll do it that way. Hold on. Let's do it this way. Turn the chat off. Share screen. PDF. Share. Okay. So, and I'll make it a little bigger. That might be a little too big. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure this is going to work well. But anyway.
No, it's okay.
Oh.
Okay.
That's okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. So, we're actually up here. All right, so let's get started. We'll jump right in. So today we're still studying the Amida, of course. This section of the Amida that follows the praises section, or the request section, excuse me, the bakashot, from the same word as bavakasha, please. This is the hodayot section, or the thanks section. So the word hoda'a. Oops, let's just let some more people in here. The word hodayot has the root shoresh h, d, and then a, like an ayin. And so those three root words have the same, are part of the same, not three root words, three root letters, are have as part of that shoresh words like toda and modim and modeh, like we've heard of modeh ani lefanecha, the first prayer we say in the morning. Yoducha, like Yoducha Sela, right? That's the end of some of our prayers. Lehodot, Tov lehodot ladonai. It's good to give thanks to the Lord. So all these words have to do with thanks, or hodah, right? So hodayot is the plural, and it means all the things we're thankful for. So if you're following along either on the screen, page 159, in the Hebrew and the English, and in fact, we included Ritzeh in the praise in the request section, because we said any time the word begins with, Ritzeh or Rotza or Yehi Ratzon, all of that is may it be your will too, that there was some sort of a request in it. Although some sources consider the Hodayot section as starting with the Ritzeh and V'techezena, this here. I assume everyone can see the screen properly, yes? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they consider that the start of the Hodayot section instead of the end of the praise section, thanks section. And the reason they do that is because they consider it kind of a preamble to the actual thanks coming up. So because the prayer is accept our thanks, please accept our thanks, and that's, and how do we know that? Like, we're asking God to accept our thanks by doing something, by giving us our historic place to do all the offerings and to show our thanks. The idea is so that we can thank you properly. So, and what it's referring to here is in terms of the offering, is the daily offering, the daily todah offering. Mizmor LeTodah, we say that on page 20 in the morning prayers. That was a bread waving offering, a bread waving ceremony, and it was all about thanks. So the idea of Ritzeh being about the preamble to the rest of the thank yous coming up makes perfect sense. It's a place that we can do our thanks the way we used to do them. So that's kind of neat. So let's go through the different paragraphs. So we've talked about Ritzeh already. Looking at Modim Anach Nulach. Again, the Nusach that we're in is all still Ahava Rabbah. So that opening 1-5 and that raised third flat second at the end. Yada da 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 yada da da yada da 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 da. So same thing here. Modim Anachnu Lach. Because we're trailing off into silent prayer, we don't use the 1-5 motif. It's actually like an ending motif. We only have 3 words to end it, so there you go. But when we do pick up at the bottom here, Hatov, that's got the opening motif. Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha v'hamrachem kilo tamu chasad v'hamrachem kilo tamu chasad. Oh my goodness. Let me do that again. Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha v'hamrachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'olam kivinu lach. I can tell it's going to be one of those days. Anyway, here we go. So in this paragraph here that the Chazan or the Shliach Tzibor leads, there's 2 mentions of Todah in it. That's Modim, right over there. And oh, I lost the other one. Nodeh, here's the other one, Nodeh. Okay, so that's on the right-hand side. While in a traditional repetition of the Amida, when the leader is saying this paragraph, it's traditional for the congregation to say this paragraph. And in this paragraph, we have 6 mentions, or another 4 mentions of Todah, Modim, and Hodaot, and Modim and Hodaot. So 2 of each. Okay, so the Talmud teaches that if the prayer leader says the word Modim twice, he's stopped. Because it's as if he's saying that there are 2 powers in the world to thank. That's in the Talmud, Brachot 33b. And even furthermore, there were several versions of this prayer in the Talmud, which the rabbis of the Talmud consolidated into the one we have here, the Modim we have here. That comes from the Sota. We'll get to the question of why there's 2 different Modims in the first place, but we'll talk about that in a second. But let's talk about what Modim here means. What does Modeh mean? So Modeh, as we've said, comes from the root word thanks, or thank you or appreciation. But in modern Hebrew, and in fact, not just modern Hebrew, but in the Talmud itself, there's a different definition for the word modim or modeh. And those are defer or concede. Or in modern terms, in modern Israeli Hebrew, the root hada, is to admit or to confess. So it's interesting. It sort of twists the way we think about modim and thanks and so forth. So let's take a look at that. And even the choreography of modim, which is to bow, no bend in the knees. It's just a straightforward bow from the waist. Both the content and the choreography of modim can actually be thought of as fitting more seamlessly with the notion of deference than thanks. And modim is one of the handful of times during the daily prayer services when we tip and bow forward, which could be thought of more of a humble submission rather than gratitude. So if you look at the content of what we're supposedly thanking God for in modim, it actually fits better with the notion of deference. So if we read it that way, we defer to you and recount your praise for our lives. We trust our lives into your loving hand. Our souls are in your custody, and your miracles are with us every day, and your wonders and goodness are with us at all times, evening, morning, and noon. You are good, for your mercies never fail us, and the compassionate one, for your loving kindness never ceases. For we have placed our hope in you. So deference is really, really appropriate there. Whereas we could be thankful for all those things, but this is an element of putting our trust in God. Vahaboteach badonai, right? And so that kind of way of thinking is probably more in tune with what the Talmud is saying. Ultimately, many things are out of our hands, right? We put a lot of trust in God in all that we do, and that's in spite of our prayers and our best efforts. Because when something goes wrong, the impulse is to be angry or show resistance or lash out and so forth. Modine reminds us that a better approach is often acceptance of what life throws at us. And if we can achieve that, I think that's something to be extremely thankful for in the traditional sense. Why are there two Modine prayers? There's one, the one on the left side, one on the right side. The one on the right side here is said by the reader, as we said. The one on the left side by the congregation during the repetition of the Amida. So, remember last week when we talked about Rabbi Hoffman, and that the Musaf Amida is supposed to have one's own personal prayer inserted? So this is historically the moment for that. Going right back to the time of the Talmud and right back to the thinking of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, our famous group of people who put together the Amida around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. So there was, and we also know that there's a distinction between Keva and Kavanah. Keva is the fixed nature of prayer. The Sidur is mostly Keva, right? It's got a fixed outline of prayers that we're supposed to say. It's very, scripted and so forth. That's Keva. And Kavanah, as you know, Kavone, right? That's the spiritual side, the improv, the flexible, the personal side of prayer. And so, as we know, before Sidurim came into full effect, and certainly before the printing press came around, but even just the single Sidur that each community had for the leader, the prayers were more improvised, right? They were more personal, and now that improvised. The improvised nature of prayer is replaced by more keva, this was the moment that the rabbis decided would be a good opportunity for private prayer. And there was for many, many years, many decades and centuries. But as we know, the rabbis were concerned, particularly around the destruction of the Second Temple, that we're going to lose a lot of our traditions if we don't write them down. And so the rabbis took to writing a paragraph that was a personal prayer. It's kind of comical that we wrote down something that was intended to be kavanah, that was intended to be the personal prayer. So that's why there's two paragraphs, but this is the moment that we're supposed to add in our own personal prayers. So, and that's why you'll see that in most cases when the cantor knows what they're doing, there will be silent prayer. Like even during the repetition of the Amida, the cantor or Shliach Tzibur will say the first few words, go quiet, and just come back with the end. And the idea there is that, yes, there's a paragraph that's written out, but you don't want to impose on people's personal, and private prayers if they so choose to do that. So that's why that looks like that. Let's go on and look at, any questions on that so far, by the way? Unmute yourself because I can't see you with my screen shared, really. No? Okay. All right. Just checking. Okay, so going on to, we're going to leave out the Alhanisteen for now, but we'll come back to that when we have modifications throughout the year, that section of our text. So we're going to look at Ve'al Kulam at the moment. So we've opened our section with thank you, or we concede to you, but let's go back to the thank you theme for now. Ve'al kulam, and for all these things, yitbarach ve'yitromam. We will bless you, from the word baruch, and ve'yitromam, and we will praise you, or shimcha, praise your name, malkenu, our sovereign. Tamid leolam va'ed. Tamid means ongoing, and leolam va'ed is an expression that means forever and ever. It means the world forever, but the world or the universe or eternity are all linked in together in Hebrew, or at least in prayer Hebrew. The chol hachayim. So now we're moving from the particular, talking about Israel and the ability to make sacrifices and all that sort of stuff, to Israel meaning the people Israel. As we had, the paragraph was Modine Anachnu. It's not a personal prayer; it's a communal prayer. We thank you. Now the Chol HaChayim, we're moving to more general, the all living creatures, and all for all things. Ve'al kulam, ve'chol HaChayim, and all creatures Yoducha Sela will praise you. Sela. Sela is a fantastic word in Hebrew. It has no English translation other than, you usually see it printed in the book as Sela. This book doesn't even add that word in. May every living creature thank you and praise you faithfully. Faithfully is the word it's using. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't really translate it because there's two Selas and it doesn't say faithfully twice. But anyway, Sela is superlative over Amen. May it super be so. We will praise, or we are to praise your name in truth. Ha'el, God, Yeshuatenu, our Savior, Ve'ezratenu, and our help. Sela, again Sela. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, God. Hatov shimcha ulchana el hodot. So we mentioned in the Modim up here that this is one of the rare places in all of our davening where we just bend forward from the waist in a small bow. Here, in the Chol HaChayim, Baruch atah Adonai is another bend and bow and upright, just like the beginning of the Amida. And then Hatov Shimcha, how good is your name? Ulchana el hodot, and all the things you do, you're worthy of hodot, worthy of thanks for that. Okay. Any questions on that? The Nusach is just this, it continues to be the same. Ve'al kulam yitbarach mitromam shimcha malkeinu tamid le'olam va'ed ve'chol hachayim yoducha sela v'hallelu et shimcha be'emet ha'el yeshuateinu ve'ezrateinu sela baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha we're going to, we could take a look at, let's take a look at Eloheinu v'Avotenu. This is Barchenu v'Abracham Shuleshet. Interesting, this is another bakasha, because we're asking God for like 3 things in a row, but we're going to see why we go back to bakasha in just a moment. So Eloheinu v'Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, Barchenu v'Abracham Shuleshet b'Torah, bless us with the threefold blessing as in the Torah, HaKetuvah, Al Yedei Moshe Avdecha, the Torah written down by your servant Moses, Ha'amura, saying, Mipi Aharon uvanav, which was from the mouth of Aharon to his children, Kohanim, they are Kohanim, and this is, it was announced by all the Kohanim, Am Kidoshecha Ka'amur, the holy segment of your people. Well, we're all holy, of course. Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, and you need all 3 of these for Birkat Kohanim, because without the Kohanim being the messengers, you don't have the prayer at all. It isn't said at all, except in the basic form here. If you don't have Levim, who's going to wash the hands? Who's going to lead the choir? Who's going to do all the temple work to get this happening? And if you don't have Yisraelim, you can't, there's nobody to transmit God's message, God's praises to. So, what are the blessings? Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless and yishmor. Lishmor is to guard and guard you. The congregation says, Ken yehi ratzon, may it be so. Yes, may it be your will. In the British tradition, we say Amen, Ken yehi ratzon. North American and Israeli, just Ken yehi ratzon. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Ya'er, may God show favor to you, panecha, to your face, elecha vichuneka, and be gracious to you, has that word chen in it. We talked about that, which is contentedness, happiness. In this translation, gracious to you, but really accept you. Like Noach, that expression Noach and Chain, that inversion of the two letters, because Noach was blessed by God's grace during his generation, so that there's the root of Chain, Noach. Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'asem lecha shalom. May God show you kindness. Panav elecha, right, before your face, before God's face. Ve'asem lecha shalom, and grant you peace. Kein yehi ratzon. Okay. So that's immediately followed by Sim Shalom here, and I'm going to lump them together for a little bit to talk about this next bit of Hodah, why this is Hoda'ah. So why is it Hoda'ah? Why is Sim Shalom thanks? So let's take a look at the meaning of the words first, and then we'll come back to discussing what this is about. Sim Shalom, grant peace. That doesn't sound like a thanks, that sounds like a request, right? Grant peace in the world, tova uvracha, goodness and blessing, chen v'chesed, kindness and grace. We talked about graciousness before. V'rachamim, and compassion, aleinu, on us, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, and on all your people Israel amecha. Some people add ve'al kol yoshevei tevel, and all people on earth. Barchenu avinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Bless us, our parent. Kulanu ke'echad, everyone together, be'or panecha, with the light of your countenance, your face. Ki ve'or panecha, for the light of your face, natata lanu, gives us, Adonai Eloheinu, Torat, you gave us Torat Chaim, the living Torah, ve'ahavat chesed, and a love of doing kindness, utzdaka, and tzedakah, or charity, or justice, another word for that, uvracha, and blessing, ve'rachamim, and compassion, ve'chayim, and life, ve'shalom. So, and peace, which is interesting because that parallels the first line. All the things that we say God is, we ask God to give to us. And we're up to here. V'tov be'einecha, and may it be good in your eyes. Levarech et amcha Yisrael, to bless your people, Israel. B'chol eit, in every time, uv'chol sha'ah, in every hour, bishlomecha, with your peace. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, God, hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom, the one who blesses, has the word Baruch in it, right? Et amo, your people, Yisrael, Israel, b'shalom. So that's with peace. So that's the idea behind the Sim Shalom. It is totally a request for peace. According to the Mishnah in Masechet Tamid, the 5th perek, the first Mishnah, if you're interested, it's studied when we study near Shabbat Beha'alotecha. None of the sages in this Talmud discussion are trying to convince us that Sim Shalom is Sim Shalom and the Birkat Kohanim, the blessing before it, that they are a prayer of Hoda'ah. And by the way, that applies to Shalom Rav, which is the counterpart to Sim Shalom when it's not a morning service, which means anytime we're not offering a sacrifice, in temple times, of course. They all agree that this is a bakasha, a request. And the sages put this in here because they wanted every Amida, and in fact every prayer that we have, to finish with a request for peace. And they say that this because there is no vessel that contain a blessing but peace. I mentioned that during Kabbalat Shabbat a couple of nights ago, on Friday night, if you watched the live stream. So, for example, like in the end of the Kriyat Shema section, the blessings after the Shema, it ends with Sukkot Shalomecha, right? Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shalomecha. There's asking for the Sukkah of peace, the covering with peace. In Birkat Kohanim, as we just saw, V'yasem lecha shalom, and may you grant peace. And the personal prayer after every Amidah ends with, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, make peace, Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, may you grant peace for us, V'al Kol Yisrael, and for all Israel, V'imru Amen. So we have this blessing for Shalom at the end of all of our major sections of prayer. And so the sages thought it would be good to end the Amidah, even though we're in the Hodayot section, to stick in this final prayer for peace. So, that being said, the sages consider this as a summary or even a complete replacement for Birkat Kohanim. Birkat Kohanim is the Davening service, where, as we said, you know about this probably, where the Kohanim put their hands kind of like this under their talitot, and they transmit the blessing that we talked about right here at the bottom of the previous page, in a sort of formulaic way, call and response with the Cantor or the Shliach Tzibor. Yavarechecha, they say Yavarechecha, Adonai, Adonai, V'yishmerecha. So this whole drawn out version of this prayer. So the rabbis of old said that this is a summary or even a complete replacement of that service, which itself ends V'yasem lecha shalom. May God grant you peace, particularly for times when either davening privately, or if there are no Kohanim and you don't say the Duchanan service, this is the Sim Shalom can be like a replacement for all of that. There are other parallels in it as well if you really wanted to compare the words in both Birkat Kohanim and Sim Shalom, but we'll leave that for another time. There's parallels in Barcheinu Avinu, there's parallels in Varachamim and V'chaim V'Shalom and so forth, but we'll leave that for another time. Good. So the nusach of Sim Shalom, again, just it sticks with the Ahava Rabbah mode. But often, like there's opportunities for word painting in this in particular. It's a longer prayer, so you're going to get more words, more opportunities for word painting. So, for example, well, I'll tell you when I get there. You'll see it, though. Sim Shalom ba'olam tova uvracha chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu. There's one v'rachamim. We're looking for mercy, a little bit of a gentler request. Ve'al kol Yisrael amecha barucheinu avinu kulanu kechad be'or panecha. So we have here an opportunity to move up to the relative. It's not the relative major; it's a fourth higher, but we do move into the major. Bless us, our Creator, one and all with your light. Whenever you have a light phrase in the middle of a whole bunch of other praises of God, this is usually an opportunity for a little bit of a foray into a different part of the nusach. So we have that transition to melody. Kiveyor panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. There's our pivot back to the nusach. Torat chayim ve'yahavat chesed. Ahavat chesed, right? A love of kindness. Utzedakah uvracha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom. V'tov beinecha levarech et amecha Yisrael. B'chol eit uv'chol shah b'shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai. Something's about to happen here. Hamevarech et amo Yisrael. B'shalom. So now we transition back to this Adonai Malach mode, this major mode, and that is really a transition, not just a foray, not just a detour, because as we know in Nusach, the cantors, as I could talk about the rabbis until the cows come home, but it's really the cantors who set the music for this, the Shlichei Tzibor, the people who are running the services from temple times, usually the Levim. They knew that transitioning to a new nusach, the different stage of the service, is really, really important in getting the congregation, bringing the congregation along for the musical ride, the spiritual journey that's built into the music. So here we're transitioning to Adonai Malach mode, which we said is major. Why? Because the next thing that happens, not in this packet, is the full Kaddish. And that's in Adonai Malach mode. Good, so let's take a look back here. If it is, let's take a look at different occasions. So page 160. If it's Chanukah, we add in the Alhanisteen paragraph. That's an opportunity for a musical composition. So some people like to do like Alhanisteen ve'al haburkan ve'al hagevurot ve'al hateshuvot ve'al hamilchamot she'asita lavoteinu b'yamim hahem b'zman hazeh. It's a composition, but what nusach is it in? It's still Ahava Rabbah. We've got that. Ya Alhanisteen 1 5 1 2 3 4 5 1. Actually, that's 1 4. It doesn't matter. We're still doing the raised third flat second in this. Ve'al hamilchamot she'asita la'avoteinu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. So that's what's in the Musaf. Ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol. So we're still in a Havarabah mode. But we have an opportunity later on. I love this. You don't have to do this, but this is one of the moments where if we're in Hanukkah, why not sing the ubiquitous, quintessential, probably the nauseating by the point this comes around with Hallel and everything, having been before this, to bring in our Ma'oz Tzor. So at the end of it, V'yachakein ba'u vanecha lidvir beitecha ufinu v'teicha lecha v'ti. I like the British version here. V'tiharu et mikdashecha v'idliku nerot bechatzot kodshecha v'kavu shmonat yemei Chanukah elu lehodot. There's our hodot, by the way. Ulhalel shimcha gadol. Whenever we talk about Alhanisteen, about this or that or the other thing, it's talking about thanks for those things. And it says there, it's not in the Hebrew, but they put it in the translation. They should put like square brackets around it here. We thank you for Hanisim, ve'al hapurkan, and for the deliverance, ve'al hagavurot, and for the strengths, and for the tishuot, and for saving us, and all that sort of stuff. So whenever you have al, just like down here, ve'al kulam, and on these things we thank you. Yeah.
I have a question. When you look at the small print here and most of this one, instead of the E vowel, is instead of being a dot, which it is in the Siddur, it's a kind of just a thickened little short line.
Well, I think it's just the zoom level. Just 1 second. I think it's just a. Well, I mean, here it's a thicker dot because the words are bold, but I think it's just the font. You're right. This is a little more line-like than dot-like.
Yeah, and some of the other ones are more like a horizontal. Yad Halashim. It's also anyway. There's on the little one. It looked.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a font thing. So sometimes you see like this. Do you see here? There's like a thick vertical line. That isn't a vowel. There's another one over here.
I know that. That's the accent to the word.
Correct. The accent of the word is called a meteg. So yeah, but I'm not sure. I think that what you're referring to is just a font thing and a zoom thing. Not zoom the program. I mean a zoom in level. You're right. This does look a little bit strange.
And then because here when you say v'hadliku, it almost looks like that, and the Yisrael there and the Hadliku here look kind of the same.
Yeah, so this is Vehidliku. So that is an E. And where were you talking about? Yisrael?
No, Yisrael, because I said Vehadliku Nerot. But no, it's Hidliku Nerot. That's right.
Vehidliku, yeah. Yeah, you're right. The font is a little bit funny, but I don't know why it's so thick. It really is weird because
don't ask. I don't
because
know.
the chirik under the lamed is the normal size. So I don't know. Maybe it's I have no idea. Can't explain it. You stumped the cantor. Okay. So that's good. So what about the choreography of all of this? So going back to our Modine. So we start the Modine, the Hodayot section with Modine, of course, and we said that this is one of the rare moments where we actually just bow forward. We don't bend the knees. So Modim Anachnu Lach, for 3 words we bow forward. Modim Anachnu Lach, and then upright for Sha'atahu. So that's that. And then, of course, we're standing for all of this with our feet together because this is still part of the Amida. During the silent Amida, of course, we're standing with our feet together. During the repetition of the Amida, we can be seated, as of after Lador Vador at the end of the Kedusha. So the question often comes up, well, how do we bow from the hip if we're seated? because we do bow even during the repetition of the Amida. And so there's different ways of doing that. You either in your seat, you're literally just bow forward. That's totally acceptable. Or some people actually stand just for that moment so that they can bow and sit at the end of it. But there is supposed to be some sort of indication of bowing forward. We have other places where we bow when we're sitting. For example, in Birkat Hamazon, when we say in the Mazuman section, and I'm blanking here. It's the opening line. So Rabbatayna Varech, and we bow forward. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Metavet Olam. And also when somebody is called to the Torah for an aliyah, when they say Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach, technically we're supposed to bow forward for Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. What's that from? It's from all the Baruch Hus that we would normally be standing. We don't have to be standing for an aliyah when somebody else has an aliyah, so we still bow forward from the hip even when we're seated. So that's our Modim bow. And again, remembering that that's like in submission or in conceding to putting our trust in God. So that's that. And then we have the Baruch Atah Adonai in the V'chol HaChayim. That is our bend and bow. Baruch, bend the knees. Atah, bow from the hip, and Adonai, upright. It does take some practice. I've taught students where coordinating the bend the knees, and then do you bow forward with the knees still bent? No, because then you fall over. Do you stand up first after the bending the knees and then bow forward? Yes, you could do that, but it's supposed to be kind of a fluid motion. So bend the knees, then straighten and bow, and then upright. That's the idea. And that is because we are ending the Hodayot section. So we take that opportunity, just like we do at the end of many prayers, to bow on our way out. So we're going to talk about that at the end of the Amida. Well, actually, we're kind of there, right? So we just did Sim Shalom. At that moment, during the silent Amida, or during our COVID times at KBI, we do the Amida out loud, and we give a moment for private prayer and reflection at the end of our straight through aloud Amida, and it finishes with Oseh Shalom Bimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. So for this one, we take our 3 steps backwards. Oseh Shalom Bimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, we bow to the left, Aleinu, we bow to the right, and Ve'al Kol Yisrael, bow forward, Ve'imru Amen, and we're upright, and we all say Amen. So that's the choreography. Any questions so far? I know I'm moving kind of quickly. Okay. So what happens if there's no minyan? As we always discuss that. So the Amida is said privately. And so when you get to, and so we do say the Hodaya section out loud. When we get to, sorry, just having trouble scrolling here. When we get to Modim, if there's no minyan, we say the reader's, not Kaddish, but the reader's Modim. So silent Amida, we say this one. Repetition of the Amida, we say this one. There's no repetition if there's no minyan. So I just wanted to clarify that. And if there's no minyan, we don't say Birkat Kohanim, which is the bottom of page 160. That's a very, very much a communal prayer, and we leave that out when there's no minyan. Why do we think of it as a communal prayer? Not necessarily from just the text here, but because of the Davening ceremony, which is the longer, drawn-out version of this that I described before. You need Kohanim and Levim and Yisraelim to participate. This is very much a communal prayer. Not just we hope for this or that for the community, but it took all members of the community to actually perform this prayer. So we leave it out entirely when there's no minyan. What about connections around the calendar? So, just scrolling here, we already talked about Chanukah. When it's Chanukah, we add the Alhanisteen paragraph. It's not possible, the corollary to Chanukah, also beginning with Alhanisteen, is Purim, but Purim never falls on Shabbat. So the Siddur will never have the on Chanukah or Purim. right? Not this Siddur, not the Shabbat and Festival Siddur. The weekday Siddur would have it in its morning service, but we don't say Musaf on Shabbat. Let's say that again. Purim never falls on Shabbat, so we don't have an Alhanisteen requirement. Okay, and then here ve'al kulam, we insert during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva the 10 days of repentance, which is the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We add one of the traditional expressions for God to remember us for life. The idea being written in the Book of Life, Uchtov, and may we and may we be written, L'chaim Tovim, for good life, Kol b'nei veritecha, everyone in the covenant of your everyone in your covenant. So that's one of the traditional lines that we add for the Aser Yemei Tshuva. The other one is in the middle of Sim Shalom. Before we say the final blessing, we add in the longer formula for remembering us for life. B'Sefer Chaim, in the Book of Life, Bracha v'Shalom, blessing and peace. Ufarnasa Tova, and good sustenance, they translate it as, but parnasa is like the ability to earn money through work. Nizacher v'nikatev, may you remember us and inscribe us, write us. Lefanecha, we add lefanecha when we want it to be like before you, is the literal translation, but like may it be on your mind, before you, like in your mind's eye. Anachnu v'chol amcha beit Yisrael, us and all of the house of Israel, v'chayim tovim, for good life, shalom, and peace, connected with Sim Shalom. Baruch atah Adonai oseh hashalom, which is the you are the doer of peace. They translated as source of peace, but oseh la'asot is to do. What about the nusach for these things? So you can do it in the nusach of Arabah. You just continue. So ve'al kulam yitbarach v'yitromam shimcha malkinu tamid le'olam va'ed uchtov lechayim tovim kol b'nei veritecha. But I like to transition to something a little bit more familiar for the high holidays during that time period. Uchtov lechayim tovim kol b'nei veritecha. Back to the nusach. V'chol ha'chayim yodu chasela. So it does flow fairly easily, and it's a congregational melody that people will often sing along. The same thing here. B'sefer chayim b'racha v'shalom u'farnasa tova nizacher v'nikatev lefanecha anachnu v'chol amecha Beit Yisrael lechayim tovim u'shalom. Back to Nusach. Baruch atah Adonai oseh hashalom. So transitioning not just back to the Nusach HaRabah, but ending it with transitioning one more time into Adonai Malach for our big finish in the full Kaddish. There are no other alternatives in the Siddur, just I guess more gender egalitarian or less related to the sacrifices and so forth. This Siddur gives you other options. So that's our connections around the calendar. What about variations in the prayer? So we get to Sim Shalom. Sorry, it was right there already. Sim Shalom is the prayer that we say at this part in the Musaf Amida on a regular Shabbat. In services where we would not recite Birkat Kohanim, well, I don't know why I'm mentioning this really, because there isn't a Musaf service where we don't say Birkat Kohanim. So, but in Mincha and Mariv, the Sim Shalom gets replaced with Shalom Rav. I don't know why I mentioned that, because that's not in Musaf. But anyway, okay, that's what I wrote down. To finish up, any questions before I go on? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all for a moment. There's also something in the chat. Kiwi said Kivinu is one of his favorite words. I like that. I also love the beard, by the way, Kiwi. Is that your Omer beard? Yeah, got that going on too. Okay. So finish up, I'm going to go to a little bit of Kabbalah, which we don't often do. I'm not a huge fan of Kabbalah, but I thought this was interesting. Hod, which is the root word, two-letter root word of Hodah, right? Hodah, of thanks. Hod is one of the Sfirot, since we're in the counting of the Omer, Sfirata Omer. And as you know, each day of the Omer we count up from 7 different combinations of spheres or Sefirot. I think the words may be connected etymologically, but I'm not sure. Maybe they just sound the same, sphere and Sfirot. But during the counting of the Omer, we pair combinations of these 7 Sefirot, and leading up to a total of 49 of them when we do that all together, 7 times 7, leading us up to Shavuot. So Hod is one of the mystical Sefirot, and it's associated with the left thigh. The left thigh. It's important to know this, I think. We can't get by without knowing this. Now, that's an interesting one, because the left thigh is probably one of the most distal components of our body from the brain, as we're doing our thanks, right? And therefore, the function of the left thigh has absolutely nothing to do with intellectual contemplation, right, and thanking God. So the idea that the rabbis, the mystical rabbis, probably in Tzfat, put forward, is that it relates to the concept that Hodah, or Hod, is about acceptance and acknowledgement, which we said earlier, right? That it isn't, Hodah isn't thanks, but acceptance. That one accepts the principle that one doesn't understand, but nevertheless that it's with our thighs that we move forward, that we strive, that we advance, even in the face of obstacles that we can't understand. And this comes from Sha'arei Ora, which is a mystical book, Jewish mysticism, by Rabbi Yosef ben Avraham. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. It looks like Gikatila, but I'm not sure. Gikatia? Was he Spanish? I don't know. Could be. There's lots of Spanish mystics and Talmidei Chachamim around the end of the 13th century the 13th century of the Common Era. So again, the idea of even in the Sfirot, we're talking about Hodah as acceptance. So it just goes to talk more about what we mentioned earlier. That's all I got for today. Do you guys have any questions?
Why is left thigh important? The right thigh is equally far away.
I don't know. Probably one of the other Sfirot has to do with the right one. But
so when Jacob fought with the angels and he got injured, was it his left leg that got injured?
Maybe. Maybe.
I mean,
I don't know. This is one of the reasons that I'm not so into Kabbalah. It's just so, there are so many pieces that we don't understand. We just say, oh, okay, let's designate this as this and that as that. I'm sure just because I don't know very, very much about it, that I don't understand why the things come about. But that's part of mysticism, is that we say, let's designate this, and therefore we have ways of studying it. Like, why do we put, when we get married, why do we have our new spouse to be, put our rings on our index finger, and not on our ring finger, where we eventually transfer it to later after the ceremony? Well, because supposedly the left index finger is the side that's closest to our heart, that there's a direct connection from the end of our left fingertip to our heart, because the heart is kind of on the left, leans to left. The doctors of
makes no sense actually, frankly, but that's okay.
So this is mysticism. This is what we believe. This is a way that we connect it. I mean,
I know, but I mean, it makes there's many things, both in the Chumash and in some of those other things, that you can kind of translate and rationalize to something that is really anatomically, physiologically, whatever makes sense. But a couple of these things don't make sense.
Right. I mean, look at this past week's, now we're on to something else, but Tazria Mitzora was our Torah portion. So you're looking at Tzora'at, which is translated as leprosy, but it's not a leprosy. It's a spiritual thing. This is entirely tied up in, or at least related to by Kabbalah, to have an illness in the walls of your house, and that it's connected to lashon
Or
hara and evil
stones
speech.
that you're going to build a house from yet, as in one of the parshiot, right?
Right.
That you have, yeah, no, but they call tzara anything that is disease or eruption or blemish of
Right.
any sort. Because then they go to some descriptions of those blemishes that really do not exist in real life, and so most of the time then they become people who have that tzara are exempt.
Right, right. So it's that's why it's in the mystical realm. That's why it goes to Kabbalah. But anyway, Kabbalah can be interesting to study. You know, other things that don't really matter that much. But you know, like gematria, the way you can find a word connected to another word just by looking at it, the numerical value of its letters, and it is there are a million ways to connect anything you want to just about anything else that you want. But we look for ways to find spirituality. I'm not making fun of it. I use it actually. I like gematria for looking at, you know, when somebody passes away and you do a eulogy. You can often find ways, you know, to honor them and connect them with important words and important facets of their life, and that show why they were the people that they were. It's kind of fun, but it is in the spiritual realm, and I'm not an expert in it, to be honest, but I do like finding these things that back up the meanings of the prayers in particular. So that's why I brought that in. Okay, so that's it for today. We are, let me just double check the calendar, but I think we're on for next week. We are indeed. Yes, so, but as we mentioned, it is the counting of the Omer, so today is the 21st day of the Omer. If you've not already counted the Omer for today and you want to do that, you would count 21 days. And tonight we had one more after sunset. Okay, have a good day, everyone. See you next week.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Jason.
My
Bye.
pleasure. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.